I remember that morning like it had been carved into my memory with fire. The sun streamed lazily through the curtains, and the world outside seemed perfectly ordinary. But inside our home, something was off. Valerie moved with a kind of careless grace that morning, humming softly as she went about her routine. But there was something in the way she avoided my gaze, a subtle hesitation that pricked at the back of my mind. It was as if she were holding a secret, a shadow she didn't want me to see. I tried to shake it off, of course. Maybe I was overthinking things, letting my imagination run wild. But there was a tension in the air, a small but persistent weight pressing against my chest. I watched her as she poured coffee into our mugs, and for a moment I studied her hands. They trembled ever so slightly, almost imperceptibly, but I saw it, and something inside me stirred, a small alarm bell I couldn't ignore. Smile that morning was the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was polite, rehearsed, almost fragile. I asked her if she was okay, trying to sound casual, to mask the unease that was already creeping into my chest. "I'm fine, Alan," she said, her voice lighter than it should have been, just a little tired from work. But I knew her. I've known her long enough to recognize the lies hidden between the lines, the small shifts in tone that reveal more than words ever could. I nodded, pretending to accept her answer, but my mind refused to let go. That day, everything seemed to carry a different weight. Her laughter, usually so natural, sounded slightly off. The way she held her phone, always close, always hidden, just enough, made my stomach twist. I noticed the way she lingered near the mirror a little longer than usual, her hair falling over, her shoulders like a shield, a curtain hiding something she didn't want me to see. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself that I was imagining things, but the feeling in my gut was relentless. It was sharp, persistent, and impossible to shake. By evening, I found myself replaying the small moments of the day, looking for clues in gestures and words, desperate for something concrete. Every glance she threw in my direction seemed loaded, every casual word rehearsed, every touch fleeting. It was subtle, almost invisible to anyone else, but to me, it was deafening. I tried to speak to her gently, carefully, testing the waters. "Valerie, are you sure everything's okay?" I asked, trying not to betray the worry in my voice. She turned to me with that practiced smile again, placing a hand on my arm. "Alan, really, I'm fine. Don't worry so much." But I did worry, and I couldn't stop. Over the next few days, her behavior shifted in ways I couldn't ignore. She started disappearing for hours without explanation, leaving vague answers when I asked where she had been. Her phone became an extension of her body, never leaving her side, always buzzing with messages she quickly hid the moment I glanced over. The little things, the soft laugh when a message arrived, the way she held herself when answering a call, the way her perfume seemed slightly different on certain days, all of it began to pile up like a storm cloud on the horizon. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers. But something held me back. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was love, or maybe it was that terrible, gnawing hope that this was all in my head. I wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that the woman I married, the woman I loved more than life itself, wasn't capable of the kind of betrayal my mind was beginning to imagine. But the signs were undeniable. Accumulating like silent warnings, the late-night texts she quickly hid, the nervous glances, the unexplained absences. Then came the day she mentioned the weekend trip. It was casual, almost offhand, the way she said it, but something in her tone betrayed a tension she tried to mask. "Alan, I'll be gone this weekend. Just a friend's wedding," she said too quickly, her eyes flicking away from mine before she added, "Nothing serious, just a small thing." I nodded, swallowing the lump forming in my throat. I wanted to ask more, to demand details, to hear names and locations, but I held back. There was a part of me that hoped, prayed even, that this was all innocent, that her secretive behavior had nothing to do with me, with us. But the lingering doubt clawed at my heart, refusing to let me rest. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay awake in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, imagining possibilities I didn't want to face. I pictured her smiling at someone else, laughing with a man whose hand held hers the way mine used to. I pictured whispered conversations, secret glances, stolen moments I wasn't allowed to witness. And every image, every scenario, twisted the knife deeper. My chest tightened, my stomach churned, and yet I couldn't look away from the thoughts racing through my mind. The more I thought, the more I noticed the details that had escaped me before, the slight hesitation in her movements, the careful way she avoided meeting my eyes, the faint traces of a perfume I didn't recognize. Each observation was like a puzzle piece falling into place, revealing a picture I wasn't ready to see. And the truth, though I didn't yet know it fully, began to take shape in the recesses of my mind. I walked the house that night, checking the rooms, trying to make sense of the unease that had settled over me. Her bedroom smelled faintly of something unfamiliar, her belongings arranged with a precision that seemed deliberate, almost calculated. The house itself felt different, as if the air carried the weight of secrets too heavy to speak aloud. I thought back to our life together, every laugh, every touch, every whispered "I love you." Were they all lies? Was the warmth I felt in her embrace nothing but a mask for deceit? My mind couldn't answer, couldn't reconcile the woman I loved with the suspicion gnawing at my soul. By the time the first rays of dawn crept through the window, I had made a decision. I couldn't wait. I couldn't pretend that nothing was happening, that the storm looming over our marriage wasn't real. Something inside me demanded the truth, no matter how painful, no matter how shattering. I didn't know what I would find, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I couldn't turn back, not anymore. That morning, as Valerie kissed me goodbye, I felt the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on us. Her smile was still bright, but I could see the tension behind it, the cracks in the facade she so carefully maintained. "Have a good weekend, Alan," she said, her voice light, but I heard the tremor beneath it. I forced a smile, my heart heavy. "You too, Valerie," I replied, trying to mask the storm raging inside me. As I watched her drive away, my mind raced with questions, with fears, with the growing certainty that everything I loved might already be gone. And that's when I made my choice. I would follow her. I would know the truth. No matter what it took, no matter the consequences, I needed to see for myself. Because by now, I was certain of one thing. The life I knew, the marriage I cherished, and the woman I loved was hiding something from me. And I was determined to uncover it, even if it shattered everything in the process. The next morning, I woke up with a determination I hadn't felt in years. The unease that had gnawed at me for days had grown into a burning need. I had to know the truth. My hands were tense as I sipped my coffee, my mind replaying every small detail from the past week, the late-night texts, the nervous smiles, the unexplained absences. Each one now felt like a clue, a breadcrumb leading me somewhere I feared to go. I left the house before Valerie even stirred, pretending I had errands to run. In truth, my heart pounded with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The city was quiet at this hour, the streets bathed in soft morning light, but inside me, a storm raged. Every turn of the wheel, every glance at the rearview mirror, reminded me that I was stepping into something I might never return from. I followed her at a distance, careful not to be seen. She drove with an easy confidence, unaware that I was trailing her, unaware that the very life she was trying to hide from me was about to be exposed. My thoughts were a chaotic swirl. Part of me hoped she was innocent. Part of me dreaded what I already suspected. But deep down, I knew. My heart knew. And nothing could silence that voice inside me that whispered, "She's not being truthful. She's hiding something, and it's not small." Valerie's car finally stopped outside a house I didn't recognize. It was a quiet place on the outskirts of town, surrounded by tall trees and a low wrought-iron gate. I parked a block away, my chest tight, my hands clammy as I watched her. She stepped out of the car, elegant as always, her movements smooth. But there was a nervous energy in her steps I hadn't seen before. And then I saw him, Oscar. The sight of him made my stomach twist, my blood run cold. He was leaning casually against the doorway, a smirk on his face, looking entirely too comfortable for a situation that should have been secret. Valerie approached him, her hand brushing against his arm, their laughter soft and intimate. I watched from the shadows, my mind refusing to fully process what I was seeing. They didn't notice me at first. They were in their own world, a world that didn't include me. Every smile, every glance, every touch between them was like a dagger twisting in my chest. My vision blurred, my hands shook. I wanted to run, to hide, to pretend I hadn't seen anything, but another part of me, something darker, angrier, urged me forward. I needed to see, to confirm, to confront. And then Valerie looked up. Her eyes met mine, and in that instant the world seemed to stop. Her smile faltered, replaced by shock, then guilt, then panic. I could see it all in her expression. The lie she had carried so effortlessly, the betrayal she had tried to hide. And Oscar, he froze to his face, going pale as if he had just realized the consequences of their actions. I stepped closer, my heart hammering in my chest. The anger, the hurt, the heartbreak, it all collided into one unbearable weight. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to unleash the fury that had been building inside me. But for a moment, I was paralyzed, unable to move, unable to speak, my mind grappling with the reality before me. Finally, I found my voice. "Valerie, how could you?" The words were barely a whisper, but they carried the weight of everything I had felt over the past week, every suspicion, every sleepless night, every pang of doubt. Valerie's eyes widened, tears welling up instantly. She took a step back, almost as if she wanted to shrink away from me, from the truth she could no longer hide. Alan, she began, her voice trembling, faltering, but no words could undo the sight I had just witnessed. Her lies, her secrecy, the betrayal, it all became tangible in that moment. I wanted to scream, to throw myself at her, to demand answers, but instead I stood frozen, the world around me spinning in slow motion. Oscar opened his mouth to speak, but I ignored him. My focus was entirely on Valerie, on the woman I had loved with everything in me, now revealed to be living a lie. "You lied to me?" I said, my voice shaking but firm. "Every single day, every smile, every I love you, every promise, all lies. And now I see why." Valerie broke down completely, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Alan, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't know what to do." But her apologies felt hollow. They couldn't erase the reality I had seen. I could still see their closeness, their laughter, the way they had looked at each other with a kind of intimacy that had once belonged to me. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was physical, undeniable, and devastating. I felt a surge of anger I had never known before. My chest ached, my hands trembled, and I realized I had to control myself. If I let the anger take over completely, I might do something I would regret. But the betrayal had ignited a fire in me, one that demanded acknowledgement, confrontation, and perhaps revenge. You didn't just betray me," I said, my voice low, almost a growl. "You shattered everything we had, everything I believed in. And you didn't just betray me, you betrayed yourself. You betrayed the love we shared. How could you, Valerie? How could you?" Her sobs grew louder, her body trembling. "Alan, please. I made a mistake. I never wanted to hurt you." But I stopped her. I couldn't listen to her excuses, not now. The betrayal had already spoken louder than any words could. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her, or if I even wanted to. The pain was too raw, too deep, and the wound too open to ignore. I stepped closer, my eyes locked on hers. "You chose him. You didn't have to lie. You didn't have to hide it. But you did. And now we both have to live with it." Valerie fell to her knees, clutching her face in her hands, tears soaking her hair, her clothes. Oscar tried to step forward, to say something, but I raised a hand, stopping him. My focus was on the woman I had loved, the woman who had destroyed everything with a single choice. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her understand the magnitude of what she had done. But even in my fury, a cold clarity settled over me. I couldn't let this moment pass without knowing every truth, every detail, every secret she had kept from me. I turned away from them then, my chest heaving, my heart pounding. The pain of what I had seen was overwhelming, but I knew one thing with certainty: my life would never be the same again. Valerie had broken me, yes, but she had also awakened something inside me. A need for truth, a need for justice, a need to reclaim the life I had lost in the shadow of her lies. That night, I couldn't sleep. Images of Valerie and Oscar haunted my mind, each glance, each touch, each shared laugh. I replayed every moment of our marriage, every shared secret, every tender smile. And now they all seemed tainted, rewritten by betrayal. The woman I had loved, trusted, and devoted my life to had chosen another. And I realized something terrifying yet liberating. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't erase the pain, But I could decide what came next. I could confront the betrayal, expose the truth, and ensure that the choices Valerie had made would have consequences. Because by now, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't just a moment of weakness, a fleeting mistake, or a misunderstanding. This was a choice, and every choice has consequences. As I sat there that night, the shadows of the room stretching long across the floor, I made a silent vow. I would uncover everything, every secret, every lie, every betrayal, and when the time came, Valerie and Oscar would face the truth. And perhaps in doing so, I would reclaim the power she had stolen from me, one painful, deliberate step at a time. The following days were a blur of restless nights and silent fury. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and every waking moment was consumed by the image of Valerie and Oscar together, the laughter, the whispers, the touch of betrayal I had witnessed. I wandered our house like a ghost, staring at the walls, at the photographs, at the life I thought I had built. It all felt shattered, fragile, like a vase smashed on the floor. I knew I had to confront her, not in fleeting anger, not in a moment of weakness, but fully, deliberately. With the weight of truth pressing down on every word I spoke, I needed her to feel the magnitude of what she had done, the destruction of trust, the violation of love. I wanted her to understand, to see with her own eyes the ruin she had caused. That evening, I sent her a message. We need to talk tonight, at home. No emojis, no explanations, just those 6 words. The simplicity of it carried a tension she couldn't ignore. I watched my phone, waiting, heart hammering with a mixture of anticipation and dread. When she arrived, she was hesitant. Her steps were slow, cautious, as though she feared what awaited her. I could see the guilt written across her face in bold, unforgiving strokes. Her usual elegance seemed diminished, replaced by nervous energy that betrayed her composure. I didn't speak immediately. I let the silence stretch heavy and suffocating, letting her feel the weight of my gaze. She shifted uncomfortably, biting her lip, her eyes darting to the floor. I could see her rehearsing excuses in her mind, searching for words that might soften the inevitable confrontation. Finally, I spoke. My voice was calm, low, but every syllable carried a sharpened edge, honed by betrayal and hurt. Valerie, do you have any idea what you've done? Her eyes widened. Alan, I know, I interrupted, holding up my hand. Don't speak. Don't even try to explain. I saw everything. I saw you with him. I saw the lies, the deceit, the betrayal. And I want you to understand something. What you've done doesn't just hurt me. It destroys the very foundation of who we were together. It shatters trust, love, and everything we believed in. Tears welled in her eyes. She tried to reach for me, but I stepped back, the anger and hurt forming an invisible barrier between us. Alan, please. I never meant, you never meant, I echoed, my voice rising with controlled fury. Valerie, love isn't about intentions. Love isn't about accidents. It's about choices. And every single choice you made from hiding the texts to sneaking away to see him was deliberate. You chose him over me. You chose betrayal over honesty. You chose destruction over love. She crumpled slightly, the tears flowing freely now, her hands trembling. Alan, I can't explain. I was confused. You were confused. I laughed bitterly, a sound that was more pain than humor. Do you know what your confusion did to me? Do you know what it feels like to love someone completely? To trust them with every part of yourself, only to watch them hand their heart to another? You didn't just cheat on me with a stranger. You betrayed your family, your vows, your promises, and every moment I ever gave you. Her sobs grew louder, her body shaking with the weight of remorse. She fell to her knees, her hands clutching her face. Alan, please. I made a mistake. I love you. I never wanted to hurt you. I shook my head slowly, my chest tight. Love. Love doesn't act like this. Love doesn't hide, doesn't deceive, doesn't destroy. What you did, it's not love. It's selfishness, indulgence, and betrayal. And now, we both have to live with it. She looked up at me then, her eyes red, swollen, pleading. Alan, I'm sorry. Please, forgive me. I can't live without you. I felt my resolve waver for a second, that tiny, fragile part of me that still loved her, still wanted to believe in us. But the hurt was too deep, the betrayal too raw. Forgiveness was impossible not yet. Not while the wound was fresh, bleeding, and aching in every corner of my soul. You think saying I'm sorry can erase the years of lies, the nights I spent wondering if I was enough, the hours of anxiety, the gnawing suspicion that something was wrong. Sorry doesn't cut it, Valerie. Not anymore. Her hands shook as she tried to reach for me again, her voice trembling. Alan, please. I'll do anything, anything. I took a deep breath, trying to control the anger boiling inside me. I wanted to scream, to shout, to make her feel every ounce of pain she had inflicted. But I also knew that true confrontation wasn't just about anger. It was about truth. It was about making her face the reality of her actions. You'll do anything? I asked, my voice cold, deliberate. Do you even know what you've done? Do you even understand the destruction you've caused? It's not about what you can do now. It's about what you chose to do before. It's about every lie, every hidden message, every stolen moment you shared with him behind my back. You've taken something sacred, Valerie, something that can never be fully repaired. Her tears fell freely now, her body trembling with guilt and despair. Alan, I didn't mean stop, I said sharply. Stop with the excuses. Stop pretending that this can be fixed with words. It can't, and you need to understand something. I loved you. I gave you everything, and you chose to betray that. And now you have to face the consequences. Oscar, who had been silent until now, stepped forward, trying to speak. But I turned to him, my eyes burning with fury. Stay out of this. This is between me and her. You don't get to explain, you don't get to justify, and you don't get to interfere. You're part of the reason this happened, but this is her reckoning. Valerie collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood over her, my chest tight, my hands clenched, my heart pounding. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted more than anyone in the world, was broken before me now. But even in her despair, I knew something had changed. The dynamic had shifted. The power was no longer hers, it was mine. I left the room then, not in retreat, but in deliberate silence. I needed space to think, to process, to plan. The confrontation had revealed the truth, but it hadn't resolved anything. Valerie's tears, her pleas, her shattered composure, they were evidence that the life we had built together was built on a foundation that could no longer hold. That night, I sat alone in our living room, replaying the confrontation in my mind. Every word, every gesture, every tear etched itself into my memory. I realized that the anger inside me, the hurt, the betrayal, it wasn't just pain. It was fuel. Fuel for clarity, for action, for reclaiming the life that had been stolen from me. I understood then that confrontation was only the beginning. It was the spark that would ignite the fire of justice and retribution. Valerie had been given a chance. Her lies had been exposed, her guilt laid bare. Now it was time to see how she would live with the truth she had created. And as the hours ticked by, I felt a cold, determined resolve settle over me. I wouldn't let this betrayal define me. I wouldn't crumble under the weight of her choices. I would rise, I would confront, and I would reclaim my life. Because some betrayals don't just hurt, they change you. They break you. They force you to choose between remaining a victim or becoming the person who decides what comes next. And I had made my choice. The days after the confrontation passed in a haze of emptiness and turmoil. The house, once a sanctuary of love and shared dreams, felt cold and foreign. Every corner reminded me of her Valerie, the woman I had trusted, the woman I had loved with my whole heart. Her perfume lingered faintly in the hallway. Her mug still sat untouched on the kitchen counter. Her favorite scarf draped over the chair as if she might return at any moment. But she wouldn't. I knew that now. I spent hours replaying every moment in my mind, dissecting every memory, every conversation, every touch. Were all the smiles she gave me fake? Were all the whispers of affection just lies? My thoughts were relentless, a storm of doubt and pain that wouldn't relent. Each memory became tainted by the shadow of her betrayal. The warmth of her laughter, the comfort of her embrace, the security I had felt all now, felt like illusions, carefully constructed to blind me from the truth. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, staring at the darkness, imagining Valerie with Oscar. Each imagined whisper, each imagined touch, each imagined smile she shared with him made my chest ache in ways I hadn't known were possible. I tried to push it away. tried to convince myself it was a fleeting thought. But the more I tried to ignore it, the louder it became. It echoed through my mind, through my heart, through every fiber of my being. Friends and family reached out. They called, they texted, they tried to comfort me. "Move on, Alan," they said. "She isn't worth it." But moving on felt impossible. Not because I still loved her, though part of me undeniably did, but because the betrayal had cut so deep, leaving a scar that refused to heal. It was a raw, gaping wound, one that throbbed constantly, reminding me with every heartbeat of the life I had lost, the trust that had been stolen, and the love that had been betrayed. I found myself wandering the city streets late at night, walking aimlessly, searching for answers in the shadows. Every familiar place felt tainted by memory. The cafe where we had shared our first coffee, the park where we had laughed until our sides hurt, the movie theater where we had held hands in the dark. All of it now felt like a reminder of what could have been a life rewritten by her choices. But amid the heartbreak, a strange clarity began to emerge. Pain, I realized, has a way of sharpening the mind, of forcing truths into focus. The hurt, the anger, the betrayal, it wasn't just suffering. It was a signal, a guidepost showing me that I could no longer remain passive, no longer allow the lies and deception to control my life. I needed to act, to reclaim my dignity, to ensure that Valerie faced the consequences of her choices. And yet the question lingered, how? How could I transform this anguish into something purposeful? The love I had once felt so freely now felt like both a chain and a weapon. A chain because it tethered me to her betrayal. A weapon because it gave me the insight, the knowledge, and the clarity I needed to navigate the path ahead. I realized that my pain could be harnessed, that my heartbreak could be the fire that forged my strength. At night, I would sit by the window, staring out at the city lights, letting my thoughts wander into the dark corners of memory and imagination. I imagined confronting Oscar, exposing him to the world, revealing every secret and every lie. I imagined Valerie facing judgment, her carefully maintained facade crumbling before everyone who had once admired her. I imagined the truth becoming undeniable, unstoppable, and I felt a grim satisfaction in the thought. But amid these vengeful fantasies, there was also a quieter, deeper reflection. I thought about myself, not about Valerie, not about Oscar, but about who I was, who I wanted to be, and who I refused to become. I realized that betrayal, no matter how devastating, does not define the victim. It does not dictate your future, your worth, or your integrity. It is merely a challenge, a trial, a turning point. And at that moment, I made a silent vow. I would not let this betrayal break me completely. I would survive, I would rise, and I would reclaim the life I deserved. In the days that followed, I began documenting everything. Every message, every encounter, every moment that could serve as proof of their deceit. I didn't do it out of spite. Alana did it to remind myself of the truth, to ensure that I could not be gaslighted, not even by her. Each piece of evidence I collected was a reminder of the reality I faced, but also a tool, a weapon for the eventual reckoning. The house remained quiet. Valerie's absence was deafening, a constant reminder of the void she left behind. I found myself speaking aloud, sometimes angrily, sometimes softly, as if to rehearse the confrontation that would come, or perhaps just to vent the storm inside me. "How could you," I whispered to the empty room, "how could you destroy what we had? How could you take everything and think it would be okay?" Sleep became a stranger. Nights were filled with dreams of her and Oscar, each one more vivid and painful than the last. I would wake drenched in sweat, heart racing, mind spinning with images of betrayal. And yet, when the sun rose, I felt a strange resilience growing within me, a determination to endure, to understand, and to act. Pain had sharpened me. Heartbreak had made me vigilant. Betrayal had taught me the value of truth. I began to notice the small things in life, again the way the sunlight fell across the floor in the morning, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant laughter of children playing outside. Life went on, indifferent to my suffering. And in that indifference, I found a strange comfort. If life continued, if the world moved forward, then so could I. I didn't have to be trapped in the past, in the betrayal, in the pain. I could choose my path, step by deliberate step, and reclaim my power. Yet even in this resolve, I allowed myself moments of sorrow. I let the tears come when I needed them, let the grief wash over me, cleanse me, and remind me of what I had lost. I didn't try to suppress it, didn't try to rationalize it away. Pain, I realized, is part of healing. And heartbreak, when acknowledged, becomes the foundation upon which strength is built. And as I sat in the quiet of the night, reflecting on everything, I realized something crucial. Betrayal is not just about the act itself, it's about choice. Valerie had chosen Oscar, chosen deceit, chosen a path that would irrevocably alter both our lives. And I had a choice too. I could let this betrayal destroy me, or I could transform it into something greater: clarity, purpose, and the eventual reclamation of my life. I chose the latter. The next steps were clear in my mind. I needed to plan a way to confront the betrayal not just with emotion, but with truth. A way to ensure that Valerie and Oscar could no longer hide, no longer escape the consequences of their actions. The anger inside me was no longer random, it was focused, precise, directed toward justice. And though it burned, it was no longer chaotic. It was a tool. In the following weeks, I observed quietly, collected evidence meticulously, and reflected endlessly. Every message saved, every secret revealed, every lie documented became part of a mosaic, a tapestry of betrayal that I could not ignore. I didn't rush. I didn't act impulsively. I waited, letting the anger and heartbreak settle into something deeper: strategy. Through this reflection, I discovered an unexpected truth. Pain, when embraced and understood, can be empowering. Betrayal, when faced with clarity and resolve, can become a guide. And heartbreak, when channeled, can fuel the strength needed to rise above the chaos, to reclaim control, and to ensure that those who hurt you understand the weight of their actions. By the end of that period, I felt a quiet sense of power growing within me. The storm of grief and anger had not vanished, had transformed into something sharper, more deliberate. I knew what I needed to do next. Valerie and Oscar would have to face the consequences, and I would be ready. Not just as a man scorned, but as a man who had endured, who had reflected, and who had emerged stronger from the wreckage of his own heart. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, I slept without the crushing weight of uncertainty pressing on me. I still grieved, still felt the ache of love lost, but I was no longer powerless. I had clarity, I had purpose, and I had a plan. The journey ahead would not be easy. Confrontation and resolution would require courage, patience, and cunning. But I was ready. For in reflection and pain, I had found the strength to face the truth and to shape the future on my own terms. After weeks of reflection, heartbreak, and silent observation, something inside me shifted. The raw, aching pain of betrayal had transformed into something sharper, something deliberate, a sense of purpose, a need to reclaim what had been stolen from me. The anger and sorrow that had once overwhelmed me now simmered beneath the surface, focused, controlled. I was no longer just a man broken by love. I was a man determined to make the truth undeniable. I began to plan carefully, not impulsively, not violently, but strategically. Valerie and Oscar had built a world in secret, a hidden web of lies, and it was time for that web to unravel. Every text, every hidden message, every clandestine meeting I had discovered became a piece of evidence, a thread to pull, a lever to expose the reality they had tried so desperately to hide. I started by documenting everything meticulously. I saved messages, screenshots, recordings, every detail that could prove the betrayal. I made notes of dates, times, and locations, cataloging every secret interaction. I wanted precision, clarity, and absolute certainty, because half measures would not suffice. The pain had taught me patience, and patience now became my weapon. Every day, I rehearsed the confrontation in my mind. Not just the words I would say, but the impact I wanted to have. I envisioned Valerie's face as the truth was revealed, the look in Oscar's eyes as their secrets were exposed, the shock of friends, family, and colleagues when they learned what had truly happened. I imagined the weight of guilt pressing down on Valerie, stripping away the confidence and control she had so carefully maintained. But revenge was not my only motivation. There was a deeper, more personal resolve at work. I wanted to reclaim my life, to restore my dignity, to prove to myself more than anyone that betrayal would not define me. Valerie's actions had shattered my trust, but they would not destroy my self. I was determined to rise above, to turn her deception into my own strength. The first step in my plan was to ensure I had undeniable proof. I needed witnesses, people who could corroborate what I had already discovered, people who could see the truth without bias. I reached out quietly, discreetly, to mutual acquaintances who had unknowingly observed her secret behavior. Their testimonies, even small details, would form a mosaic of truth, each fragment building toward the inevitable revelation. Next, I prepared for confrontation, not just private confrontation, but public exposure. I knew that the weight of truth is magnified when others witness it, when deceit cannot hide behind closed doors. I envisioned a gathering of our closest friends and family, a situation where Valerie's lies would be laid bare, her carefully constructed facade collapsing in real time. The thought both terrified and exhilarated me. This was not just revenge, it was justice. I spent nights alone, plotting, strategizing, letting the fire of anger fuel my resolve. Each scenario played out in my mind with cinematic clarity, the hesitation in her eyes, the panic in Oscar's expression, the silence of those around as they absorbed the shocking reality. I rehearsed my words, my tone, my timing, until every detail was perfected. Every step was calculated, deliberate, and inevitable. Finally, the day arrived. Valerie and Oscar were unaware that the truth was no longer hidden, that the evidence I had amassed was sufficient to expose them fully. I invited a select group of friends to an informal gathering under the guise of a small celebration, an evening of casual conversation and laughter. Everything was arranged precisely. Every guest knew nothing, but I had orchestrated the scenario to maximize the impact. As the evening progressed, I waited patiently. Valerie, unsuspecting, moved through the crowd with practiced ease, her laughter light, her gestures graceful. Oscar hovered nearby, confident in their secrecy, unaware that their world was about to be shattered. And then, when the moment was right, I began. I spoke first to a close friend, subtly drawing them into the narrative. I shared innocuous details at first, letting the story unfold like a slow-burning revelation. The tension in the room shifted imperceptibly at first, then grew, like storm clouds gathering before a tempest. Valerie's smile faltered slightly, then grew tighter, more forced, as if she sensed the inevitability of what was coming. Then, I revealed the messages. Screenshots, recordings, detailed timelines all laid bare. Gasps spread through the room. Eyes widened. Whispers began, tentative at first, then louder, more insistent. The weight of truth pressed down on Valerie like a physical force, and I watched as her composure cracked, fragmenting under the undeniable reality. Oscar's expression turned to shock, then panic, as the details of their secret encounters became clear to all present. I could see the realization in his eyes. He had underestimated the consequences of his actions, and now he faced them fully. Valerie's hands flew to her face, her body trembling. Tears streamed freely, her voice caught in her throat as she struggled to find words, to construct an explanation that would never suffice. I spoke then, my voice calm but edged with controlled fury. You thought your secrets would remain hidden. You thought your lies would go unnoticed. But truth has a way of finding its way to the surface, and when it does, it is unstoppable. Every choice you made, every betrayal, every moment of deceit, you cannot hide from it anymore. The room was silent, every eye fixed on her, every ear attuned to the revelation. I could feel the power shift between us. She had wielded control through secrecy and deceit, but now the control had returned to me. The anger and heartbreak I had carried had crystallized into something precise, undeniable. Valerie finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Alan, please." "I can explain." I shook my head slowly. "There is nothing to explain. You've had your chance. You chose betrayal. You chose lies. And now, the truth is inescapable. You have to live with it." I turned to the group, letting the weight of the revelation settle. The gasps, the murmurs, the shared shock hit was overwhelming, a tidal wave of recognition and judgment. And in that moment, I felt a strange mixture of relief and satisfaction. Not joy never, joy but clarity. Justice, perhaps, in its purest, most deliberate form. In the following days, Valerie and Oscar attempted to salvage fragments of their lives, but the damage was done. The truth was no longer hidden. The web of lies they had spun could not survive the scrutiny of friends, family, and witnesses. And as I observed the unraveling, I felt something I hadn't expected. a quiet, steady sense of empowerment. The pain had not destroyed me. The betrayal had not broken me. Instead, it had forged me into someone stronger, sharper, more determined. I reflected on everything I had learned, the nature of deception, the consequences of choices, the strength that comes from facing pain head-on. The heartbreak that had once consumed me had transformed into something else, wisdom. The anger that had threatened to destroy me had become clarity. The loss I had suffered had become a catalyst for self-discovery, for empowerment, for a renewed sense of purpose. And as the weeks passed, I realized the most important truth of all. Revenge is not about cruelty, nor is it about hatred. True revenge, the kind that carries meaning, comes from reclaiming your life, asserting your truth, and allowing those who betrayed you to confront the consequences of their actions. It is about turning pain into power, heartbreak into clarity, and betrayal into a lesson that shapes your path forward. I emerged from this storm changed, tempered by fire, focused, and resolute. Valerie and Oscar's world lay in ruin, their secrets exposed, their choices laid bare. And I, though scarred, though wounded, though heartbroken, stood taller, stronger, and more aware of the strength I carried within me. The journey was far from over, but I had crossed a critical threshold. Pain had led to reflection, reflection to strategy, and strategy to confrontation. And now, standing in the aftermath, I knew one unshakable truth. Betrayal may break hearts, but it does not have to break the soul. The aftermath of exposure brought a quiet that was both comforting and strange. Valerie and Oscar's betrayal had been laid bare, their secrets no longer hidden, and the weight that had pressed on me for weeks began to lighten. The storm of anger, pain, and heartbreak had passed its peak, leaving behind a stillness that allowed me to breathe, to think, and to begin imagining a future unshackled from deceit. I spent the first few days alone, wandering through spaces that had once held memories of shared laughter and love. The house felt emptier, but it was also clearer, less suffocating. For the first time in months, I could sit in the quiet and simply exist without the constant churn of suspicion and anxiety. The relief was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Each breath I took felt lighter, each heartbeat steadier. I thought often about Valerie, not with anger now, not with desire, but with the detached clarity that comes after the storm. Betrayal, I realized, is a reflection of choice, not love. She had chosen Oscar over me, deception over honesty, selfishness over trust. And while that choice had inflicted deep pain, it no longer held power over me. Its power had ended the moment I confronted the truth and reclaimed my voice. Moving on didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, like the sunrise creeping over the horizon, illuminating a path I had been too blinded to see before. I began to rediscover parts of myself I had neglected: hobbies, friends, and passions that had lain dormant under the weight of love and loyalty. I started exercising again, running through the early morning streets as the city awakened. The rhythm of my footsteps became a meditation, a way to shed the lingering remnants of hurt and rebuild my energy, my focus, my sense of self. One evening, I found myself sitting in the park where Valerie and I had shared countless memories. I closed my eyes and let the breeze brush against my face, letting the sounds of children laughing, dogs barking, and distant traffic fill the emptiness I had carried for so long. And in that stillness, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not complete peace, perhaps, but the beginning of it. A seed of hope that life, even after betrayal, could still be beautiful. I reflected on the lessons I had learned. Betrayal is not just about loss, it is about awakening. Pain forces clarity. Heartbreak reveals the strength within. And deception exposes truths we might otherwise ignore. I had endured, I had observed, I had confronted, and through it all, I had grown. The man who once felt powerless, overwhelmed by suspicion and heartbreak, had emerged sharper, more self-aware, and stronger than before. Friends and family noticed the change. Their messages, their smiles, their concern were no longer just about comforting me. They became mirrors reflecting the strength I had regained. Conversations that once felt hollow now held warmth. Laughter returned to my days. And the future no longer seemed like a shadowed corridor, but a broad, open path, waiting to be walked with intention and clarity. I also learned to forgive, not for Valerie's sake, not for Oscar's, but for my own. Forgiveness, I realized, was not about excusing betrayal or forgetting lies. It was about releasing the hold the past had on me, about stepping out of the cage of resentment and anger. It was about reclaiming my own happiness on my own terms. I forgave quietly, in the solitude of my mind, and in that forgiveness, I found freedom. Love, I discovered, was not lost forever. It had been broken, yes, but the capacity to feel, to trust, and to connect remained intact. I did not rush into new relationships. I allowed myself time to heal, time to rediscover the self that had been overshadowed by heartbreak. And as I did, I realized that moving on was not about replacing the past, it was about honoring it, learning from it, and carrying its lessons forward. I began setting new goals, personal and professional. Work that once felt monotonous became an outlet, a way to channel energy and focus. I reconnected with old friends, traveled to places I had always dreamed of visiting, and pursued passions that I had put aside in the comfort of routine. Each step was deliberate, a testament to the strength that had grown within me through suffering and reflection. One quiet evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, I walked along the riverbank. The water shimmered in the fading light, and I felt a sense of closure I had not known before. Valerie and Oscar were a chapter that had ended, a story that had run its course. I had confronted the truth, faced the pain, and emerged stronger. The betrayal no longer had the power to define me. I realized something essential in that moment. Closure is not about reconciliation, nor is it about revenge. Closure is about understanding, acceptance, and self-reclamation. It is about taking the pieces of a broken heart and assembling them into something stronger, something wiser, something capable of facing the future with courage and clarity. Life, I understood, would continue to present challenges, betrayals, and heartbreaks. But the difference now was in how I approached them. I had been tempered by fire, tested by pain, and sharpened by the experience. I was no longer the man who blindly trusted, who suffered in silence, or who let deception control his life. I had reclaimed my power, my dignity, and my future. In the weeks that followed, I started volunteering at a local community center, helping others who had faced betrayal and hardship. Sharing my story, offering guidance, and witnessing resilience in others became a source of healing. I realized that pain, when acknowledged and processed, could transform into empathy, wisdom, and even inspiration. The heartbreak I had endured was no longer just my own, it became a tool to help others navigate the storms of life. I also redefined my expectations for love and trust. I understood that honesty and transparency are non-negotiable, that respect and loyalty form the foundation of any meaningful connection, and that self-respect is the cornerstone of true happiness. These lessons born from heartbreak were invaluable. I carried them with me, shaping the way I approached relationships, friendships, and life itself. And finally, I allowed myself to dream again. I imagined a future filled with authenticity, respect, and love, relationships built on trust rather than pretense, connections based on truth rather than deceit. I allowed myself to hope, to feel, and to embrace the possibility of happiness without fear of betrayal. The scars remained, yes, but they were no longer chains, they were reminders of survival, strength, and growth. One day, I found myself standing at the edge of the city skyline, looking out over the lights and the hum of life below. The past, with all its pain, was behind me. The present was mine to shape, and the future awaited with promise. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air fill my lungs, and whispered to myself, I am free. I am whole, and I will live fully, without fear, without regret, and without betrayal controlling my life again. In that moment, I truly understood the meaning of closure. It was not about revenge, nor was it about erasing the past. It was about reclaiming myself, rebuilding my heart, and moving forward with courage, dignity, and clarity. The journey had been long, painful, and filled with heartbreak. But it had forged something new within me, a resilience that no betrayal could ever take away. I walked away from the past that night with my head held high, my heart stronger, and my spirit unbroken. The betrayal of Valerie and Oscar had left scars, yes, but it had also given me wisdom, strength, and clarity. And as I stepped into the next chapter of my life, I knew that no one could ever steal my peace, my dignity, or my power again.